Welcome to Patty's Aquatics. So today what I want to do is talk about what you can do if your power goes out. Of course the power would go out. Perfect timing for this video. What I want to do is go over things that you can do to potentially save your fish, save your inhabitants, and be able to make it through any type of power outage. So stay tuned. Let me show you what I'm going to do. Well, luckily for me, my power just went back on, but what do you do in those situations? I know having your power cut off can be a very stressful situation, especially if you're not prepared. So really that's the purpose of this video today. I want to be able to give you some tips and some tricks really to make it through any future power outages so you don't have to worry about losing your fish, losing anything within your aquarium, and save yourself a little less worry. So two of the subjects I'm really going to be touching on today are your water temperature and then the oxygenation within your aquariums. So the first thing I want to talk about is water temperature, and more specifically water temperatures in the winter if you have power failures. Now that's the most common scenario where I live here in Wisconsin, because if we get a big snowstorm or ice storm, that can collect on the power lines and knock a line down, and then boom, you don't have power anymore. So what do you do in those scenarios? Well, for me, the first thing I do is I grab blankets. Now, we've got a big totes full of blankets down here in my basement by my fish room, more for the family, but I also use them for my fish. I will cover all my fish tanks immediately when the power goes off in the winter. Now, you don't know how long the power is going to go out. My furnace isn't going to be working, so my house isn't going to be heated. So I want to be able to try to conserve whatever heat is in that water currently and try to keep as much of it in there as I can before it escapes. Now, another thing you can do is grab hand warmers. These things can be a lifesaver in these situations as well. How they work, if you're not familiar, it's a chemical reaction. After you take them out of the bag and you rub them together, it creates heat for a certain amount of time. So what you do with that then is, one way you can do it is you can tape it to your tank, the outside of the glass. Put a couple on there with the blanket over it. It's going to create heat in there, and it's going to try to possibly keep you a temperature that's going to keep your fish steady and okay till that power comes back on. So that's one thing you can do. Now, another thing you can do is the same thing with this heat packs. Take one of these out, grab yourself a water bottle, an empty water bottle. If you can get one of these heat packs down within the water bottle, close the cap and get it closed tight, put it in your water. That's going to create heat within your water, almost like a little internal water heater. Now, by just floating it, it's just going to float with all the air in there. You're only going to heat probably the top of the water, but if you can get it down to the bottom and get a piece of wood or rock to sit on it, heat rises. It's going to come up and heat your entire aquarium. So that's one cool trick to be able to think about. Now, what if you have an electric water heater? Well, that's pretty much the scenarios you can do. But if you have a gas water heater that you can still get hot water from, well, you could fill up water bottles with hot water and stick them in there. That'll also help create heat within your aquarium water. You can boil water if you have that capability with like a gas stove or something like that. But I wouldn't just pour scalding hot water into your aquarium. Obviously, I'd mix it with some existing water and pour it back in and try to get it to about that temperature you want. You don't want to cause any big drastic water changes as well. So those are some tips to be able to do if the power would go out and it's middle of winter. But what happens if it's like in a hot area? What if it's in the middle of summer? What if you're in an area that gets so hot and the power goes out that you don't have any way to cool your room? So what do you do if the power goes off in the middle of summer? It's getting so hot in your fish room that your aquarium water is starting to reach that area where you really need to try to cool them off to save your fish. Well, that's going to kind of be the opposite of what we just did with the winter and trying to raise your temperatures. One thing you can do is grab a water bottle again, fill it up with very cold tap water, put that cap back on and float it within your aquarium. That should help kind of at least steady those temperatures so they don't keep rising, if not lower them by a little bit. Another option are if you have frozen water bottles with water in them, float them within your aquarium as well. The only thing you want to be able to watch out is you don't want big, drastic water temperature changes at once. The same as how you don't want to be pouring scalding, boiling water into your aquarium if it's out in the winter to be able to raise those temperatures quick. You want to try to have that slow and steady decrease or increase of the water temperatures, so your fish aren't affected by it. Now, another thing that you could do is if you have battery operated fans, any type of battery operated equipment like that. If you had a battery operated fan, you could put that on top of your aquarium and point it towards the surface of the water. It's going to do two things for you. One, by rippling the top of that water, it's going to help decrease the water temperature by at least a few degrees. And also it's going to help oxygenate the water, which is something we're going to be talking about next. So like I said, the next thing we're going to talk about is the oxygenation within our aquarium. So if our filters and air pumps go off. Now, that's one area I don't need to worry about within my fish room. If you're not familiar, I do not run filters and I do not run air within any of my aquariums in my fish room. So my tanks are pretty much self-sustainable when it comes to that aspect. If I have a power failure within my house, the only thing I need to worry about is water temperature. Now, not everyone runs it that way, so what do you do if your filters and air pumps go off? Well, really the answers will be the same, but it's really going to be dependent on what your tank setup is like. If you have a bare bottom tank that's heavily stocked, you're going to need more air pumped into that aquarium to oxygenate those fish compared to if you have a heavily planted aquarium. So that's the thing. What type of setup do you have? And also, how do you oxygenate the water within your aquariums? So what do we do to oxygenate our waters? Like I just previously stated, a lot of it's going to depend really on your setup, but truly, you don't need to worry about your oxygen immediately within your aquariums. You got a few hours really to have to worry about it, but again, that setup really depends on that. Now, like I said, if you have a bare bottom tank or a tank with a heavy fish load and no plants, you're probably going to need to do something quicker than somebody that has like a heavily planted tank with those plants helping to provide oxygen for you. So what can you do? Well, really, if you have no other option, just grabbing a jar or a cup is your best bet. What you do is you just dip it into the surface of your water and you pour it back in, and you're going to continuously do that for a while, which is going to break the surface of the water and give that gas exchange to be able to add oxygen within your aquarium. Now, again, this is a tedious process. It's not something that you ideally want to do, but you're doing it only because you want to save your fish in those situations. Now, how often should you do it? Again, that's really going to depend entirely on your setup. If you have, like I said, a heavy stock tank, you're probably going to want to do it maybe for like a good 15, 20 minutes at a time, and then let it sit for an hour and then really monitor your fish. And that's going to be the biggest key, is really monitoring what's going on within your aquarium. If your fish are gasping at the surface, that's telling you that they need oxygen, and then you should do it more. And if they're doing okay after an hour, you can maybe let off a little bit. Now, if you have a heavily planted tank, you probably could wait a lot longer and before you need to really worry about the oxygen part of it. But same there. I would probably do it a good 10, 15 minutes at a crack, give it like an hour, and then you just monitor what's going on. But there's other ways to do it besides this. Just use your brain, think outside the box, think of ways that you could potentially add oxygen into your aquariums without having to manually be going like this. But there's other ways as well. So what are the other ways to be able to get oxygen within your aquarium during a power outage? Well, that's going to lead us into the world of battery backup products within our industry. And I know I can say Aquarium Co-op for sure has a couple of them. They have their battery backup air pump and the little mini USB port one. Now, how that mini USB port one works is it plugs into a USB port within, say, like a laptop or any other type of electrical device that has a battery that supports that. And then you can use that in turn to power your sponge filters or your air stones. Now, also the battery backup air pump itself, that's pretty self-explanatory. The power goes off, you have battery already within that air pump to be able to power your sponge filters or air stones. And it's very important. Now, there's other ways as well. What if you have a backup generator? Get a generator for not only your fish room, but your house. Now, that is one way to power your entire house. Another way is power inverters. You can get power inverters and hook it up to a car battery. From there, you can plug in a heater. You can plug in an air pump to be able to maintain your aquarium during a power outage. So it's really important just to really think outside the box and really think of ways, depending on what the setup of your tank is, to be able to be ready in case there is a power outage. And that's the biggest thing. You need to be prepared. Like for instance, like I said earlier myself, I know my biggest concern is in winter when the power goes off with water temperatures. That's why I always have blankets on hand and I have hand warmers on hand because I know I can make it through any of those power outages. And you should do the same. Really think of what you might need if the power goes off in the winter, if the power goes off in the summer, depending on where you live. What supplies you could have on hand to help you do it so you don't have to worry during those situations. It sucks getting in the middle of during a power outage and you don't know what to do, scrambling for something. Being prepared and not scared is always the key. So what I would like to happen is if there's anybody out there that maybe has some ideas I didn't touch on in this video, please share them in the comments. My goal with this video really is to help any hobbyists out there before the power goes out so they can be prepared and not have to worry about losing fish or any stuff like that, because when the power is out, there can be a lot of stress. You don't have to worry about, you shouldn't have to be stressing out about your fish on top of everything else. So that being said, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you maybe learned something. Hit that subscribe button if you're not already subscribed to my channel. I greatly appreciate it. And I also am offering memberships to my channel. So hit that join button if it interests you. And always remember to think outside the box and take a step back in the nature. I hope to see you next time here at Patty's Aquatics.